Okay, today's going to be fun. I'm with Dan Brenner. Hi, Dan. How are you?
Hey y'all.
Okay, we're going to talk because Dan Brenner is a teacher in the Spring Grove, Pennsylvania school district, and he is one of the guys on the inside doing modern band stuff and jazz band stuff and changing up music education on a state level and a county level and a community level and all that. And you're my hero. You are because you're doing it on the inside. You're doing it on the inside. So how did you get your start? And let's go back a little bit. We're not going to spend all day on your background, but your music. What are your music going back to the very beginning of your music knowledge? I don't know, experiences. What did you?
Um,
How'd you get started?
so I was born into a fairly musical family. My mom, beautiful alto voice, sang in church all the time. Took guitar lessons from Mark Cable. Um, and my dad performed for years in a band locally called the Bob Huska Quartet. And I think
Okay.
way back in the day at the time, like they were pretty hot stuff. And so I was around it a lot. My dad gave up performing when I was a year old.
Okay.
But as I started to, you get into fourth grade and I wanted to play drums, and I don't know if it was because my dad played drums or if it was just because I felt like that was the instrument, but I wanted to take up percussion and I did, and I joined band at West York, and it was a great experience. My dad got me a teacher, which I'm forever grateful for. I studied with Gene Budesheim, and Gene was great, very
He was
gentle.
this old school kind of like swing Count Basie
Yeah, but he also had this
esque.
crazy rudimental background. Like he was military, awesome. And all of the guys that I ever met that took from Gene, he always turned out really great dynamic players that could play big when needed to, but also like did exactly what the music asked for. So
Yeah,
I I
which we
I,
can't
I
say. We can't say that about all the other drum teachers.
no, no. But so I took lessons at a very young age, and it took off. I was playing drum kit at a fairly competent level by the time I was in fifth grade.
Okay.
And what ended up happening was my dad started to sneak me out on gigs. And it was a little different back in the day because you could sneak a kid in the back door and no one really knew that it was happening. And if the kid could hang musically, no one really said anything about it. Today, if you're under 18, like you're not getting in places. They're not going to book your band. It was a totally
Yeah, yeah.
different world. And so by the age of 13, I'm playing gigs in my dad's band. I'm getting paid to do so. So a lot of times when kids are starting to think about like, I'm going to deliver newspapers or I'm going to deliver whatever, I was making decent money as, a player in my dad's band. And one of the things that happened was,
Probably better money than you would have been delivering papers like this guy had to do.
yeah, and I was getting a really good education through it,
Yeah, of
working
course.
with all these guys who were so much further ahead than me. Like I learned a lot. Um, but my dad was a drummer and a singer. And when you're a drummer and a singer and your dad's a drummer and a singer, um, that doesn't always work really well. So I started about the age of 15, 14, 15. I started learning how to play some guitar. And I basically got a book and an acoustic guitar. And, it was the old Mel Bay. Here's where you put your fingers and,
All
and
right,
you
right, right.
go.
Uh huh.
And so I learned how to play enough guitar, and I'd be lying to you if I said it wasn't because like girls were interested in guys who sang and guys who played guitar, so that was kind of like
Yeah.
that
So
was a motivating.
back in the day, kids, that was you did that because
Yeah.
it was a thing that you wanted to meet girls and you wanted to impress them. Now
Well, my
it's idiot.
all-time favorite quote is Keith Urban. He said, "I don't understand what rock band is. No one ever picked up a girl by playing rock band." And I was like, "That's
Yes,
all."
that's my bad.
So I learned how to play. I learned how to play some guitar, and my parents kind of were smart enough and got good advice. I think that like someone said, if your son's thinking about being a music major, piano should probably be something that he concentrates on. I took from a lady in Hanover by the name of Joanne Hahn, and she was lovely. And I didn't want to do piano the way that everybody else did. I was huge into Chicago, and still am my favorite band of all time.
Hmm.
And they were doing all these David Foster power ballads,
Right,
and
right,
I'm reading the stuff as it's written, and I'm going, that's not what they're playing on the recording, man.
right,
Like
right,
that's not
right.
it. And so I would go into her and go, actually, they're playing it this way, and she would go, great, play it that way. And I was like, cool, I can do
Okay,
that. So
she's a good teacher then, because
yes,
my teacher
yes.
would have slapped my wrists.
Yeah. So I was honestly blessed with really great teachers that, I hadn't thought about it till we started talking about it, but like I was blessed with really great teachers that allowed me to be the musician and the artist that I knew I could be and felt like I wanted to be.
Right, right.
And they were like, "Great, then let's go do that. Let's do that to the best of your ability," you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Um, and then I ended up at Lebanon Valley College. I didn't go to school based upon my grades. I can tell you that. I went to school at Lebanon Valley because I met Tom Stroman my senior year, District Jazz,
Yeah.
first year that they ever did it, and he was the director. And he pulled my parents aside after the performance and said, like, "Hey, where's Dan looking next year?" And they were like, I don't know. We went and took a look at DePaul University, and I'd been up to State College, and I really wasn't feeling that. And he said, "Well, hey, before he makes any decisions, why don't you bring him over to LBC? We'd love to talk to him." And the truth of the matter is, like, they needed a drum set player, and
Okay.
so I ended up getting a half ride to go to Lebanon Valley. Um, and it was amazing. I spent 4 years learning from Tom and getting a great education. And there was always ups and downs and things like that. But like I look back and I go, wow, what an opportunity I got. And
Absolutely. He's a legend.
yeah, and to study there, and it was a private school, and even at the time it was really expensive. But for them to say like, hey, half of your tuition's covered just because you're doing what you're doing, and you know, that's the thing is being marketable. Like they needed what I had, and I needed what they had, and
Right, right.
it worked. So it was good.
Yes. So you graduated from Lebanon Valley College after 4 years, and your degree was in music ed.
So I was a bit of a high achiever. I got 2 degrees in 4 years.
Oh God.
Um, I was taking summer classes at Hack. I got a BA and a BS, right? And I always say the BA says I can play and the BS says I can teach.
Okay.
And the BA, honestly, Lebanon Valley, I love you. It's toilet paper. It does nothing for me. It just says that I completed college, but I felt like I really wanted to have it. At the time, it felt like a major achievement, and it's
Right, right,
it's
right.
done, but it is in percussion concentration and jazz concentration.
Okay.
Um, and
So
then
in
and then
percussion concentration, you went through marimba and you went through all that kind of stuff, or is it just
yes,
like
yes, and
orchestral and drum set and mallet
at the
percussion?
time you couldn't be just a drum set guy.
Yeah,
So
mallet percussion.
yeah, but I'll tell you what, Bob Novak up there at the time, Bob was great. Um, every Friday I used to go have lunch with Bob. We'd go over and this man would devour ice cream. It was awesome. But Bob and I, he kind of, I think he figured out what he had, and he came from that background of like marimba and xylophone and vibes, and I love that stuff. And I do play some four mallet things, but it's not my strength. It's not my forte. It's just something that I can do if I need to.
Right,
And Bob recognized that like I think he saw where I was heading and what I was interested in. And so like my senior year, Bob spent a ton of time working on teaching me how to play hand drums. Um, this is a guy from Polish ancestry who's living in Pennsylvania.
hmm
And what most people didn't know about him is that he got his master's degree in percussion down at the University of Miami. And he was trading marimba lessons from kids who were playing
Well,
conga
Jocko.
and all sorts of stuff like that. And so he was
Yeah.
picking that up. And so when I got to like my junior and senior year, he was like, "Look, let's specialize in what you want to do." And so he was very kind to me and taught me a lot of things that like to be honest, a white kid from York, Pennsylvania was never going to learn.
Right,
And
right.
so like he had this process where he wanted to teach me how to slap and pop on a conga.
Uh huh.
And so in the percussion room, there'd be like 40 drums all lined up. And he'd say, when you come in the percussion room, you're going to pass every one of these drums and you're going to pop on every one of them. And
Okay.
then when you leave, before you turn the light out, you're gonna pop on every one of them. And within weeks, man, I can to this day pop on any drum just because, I had this awesome teacher who spotted where I was gonna go and
Right, right.
uh, gave me the tools I needed to get there.
He was all right with you being sort of contemporary, not being completely orchestral. He saw that he saw that in you, and he didn't force you to. It was like the square peg kind of thing. He didn't force you into something that wasn't. You had to do stuff to meet your major,
Yeah, I mean,
but he
and
treated you like a unique person.
here's the thing. Yes, I play in rock and roll bands, and yes, I have a jazz background, and yes, I think classical music's awesome.
Yes.
And it's not where my strength lies, but it doesn't mean that I can't do it or that I don't enjoy doing it. So I picked up a lot from him for
Yeah.
sure.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time too, it was different because there was a lot of music that was not legit. And so, like, I remember playing in garage bands at Lebanon Valley, and we would rehearse in Blair Music Center, and you could sign out a room in the evening when it wasn't being used as a practice space. So we would tell folks that we were practicing jazz combos in there, and then we were playing like you know, Chicago and other things like that. And when the professor would pop their head in, like suddenly we're switching to so what,
Yeah,
so we
yeah,
can
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
get away with
Green
it.
Dolphin Street.
Yeah, but that's where I learned how to arrange horn parts. Like
Right.
that's because it was trial and error, and I was trying to bridge the gap. And I think but these professors were all amazing people. Like they were smart enough to kind of see what was going on and
Right,
see the
right.
direction. And then I think every now and then they'd kind of like give you the nudge in the right direction. But I think there was still a lot of like, these are things that we don't talk about. It isn't until recently that I know Lebanon Valley now has like you can go in as a drum set major. And
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
hallelujah, that's
Yeah,
great
yeah, you're
because
right. I'm
the,
glad. I will say this. I'm glad that I lived long enough to see that because it was probably worse. I got some years on you, so it was probably worse in my generation than yours about the elitism or whatever. Like I wasn't. I went to Berkeley for 2 years, and they didn't.
Mhm.
And York College didn't count that as a legitimate school,
Mm,
which was weird because the music theory was exceptional,
yeah.
but it wasn't. It wasn't. It wasn't. I did have counterpoint classes. Yes, I did. I had traditional harmony and jazz harmony. Okay, I don't know. So so
Yeah.
so yeah, those guys. Well, also Jim Miller taught there.
Yep. Jim was
Jim
still there
Miller.
when I was there.
Yeah, he's one of my mentors. Yeah, he's the only bass teacher that I don't say that. 'Cause I had another bass teacher, but Jim was the guy. He
Hmm.
was the guy. So
For a lot of people.
yeah, 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 yeah. His tree, his musical tree, it, a lot of branches of people that are from the Jim Miller school. So you graduate from okay. So you tell us about your getting into Spring Grove. So you got into Spring Grove, and it wasn't a direct kind of thing.
Mm.
I said, tell us that story.
So I graduate from Lebanon Valley in May. I had been working summers and breaks at Kohl's York East,
Okay.
um,
My wife,
selling shoes.
yes,
And
we know that place well. We know that place well.
yeah, and it was good. It was a fine job, but I recognized that I had 6 months to get it together, or college payments were going to come due, and I still had to take out some loans to go. So I hand wrote a letter to every principal of every school in York County. And I told them that I was a young, hungry music teacher and that I wanted to work in York County. I wanted to stay close to home. A lot of people dream about getting out of York County, but I did some work on the road when I was in college and I couldn't wait to get home.
Right. Right.
It's always going to be home for me. And
Same
so
here. Same here.
um, so I hand wrote letters and they probably thought I was crazy and I heard nothing. And I went out on an interview or two, and the feedback that I was getting, I was interviewing for anything because I was young and crazy, and I was
That's
interviewing
what
for
you got to do.
yeah, and I was
That is
interviewing
what you
for
got to
a
do.
choral job, and I interviewed for a band job at Southwestern, and I found out that they already had somebody in mind, and I was just in the third person that they needed to have go into the door so that they could call it, that type of thing. That's a crazy story.
Uh-huh.
And then I, uh, I I had these two bites. The feedback was, "Hey, we think you're a good guy. You interviewed very well, but you're not the right guy for this position." And I would have agreed on them. Like absolutely. Looking back, like I didn't know what I was signing up for, and that was cool. But then I got to the end of July, and I kind of had the oh crap moment. Like this isn't going to happen for me the way that I think it's going to. And so Kohl's posted that they needed a maintenance person, a full-time maintenance person, and someone that was going to basically be their custodial crew and head it up. And I was like, you know what? I got a college degree. I'm pretty sharp. I think I can clean things, and I'm a fairly tidy person. Like I need a gig and I already like working for these people. It's fine. So let's put in
Mhm.
for it. So I started the interview process on that. And I was getting further and further. And 2 days before school started at Spring Grove, I get a phone call from a very frantic Dr. Gibbs at Spring Grove Middle School.
Okay.
And he said, Dan, he said, I'm calling you because I need some help. And he said, I am staring, looking at your letter on my desk right now. And I'm thinking you might be the guy. My choral director at the middle school has been diagnosed with cancer, and they're going to go at this aggressively and quickly, and she needs to go into treatment now. And I would like to bring you in and use you as a long-term sub for her until she's able to come back. And I stepped away from a possible full-time gig for a short-term or long-term sub there because I thought, well, this is what I went to school to do, so let's do this. And I started working with the choral program. I was there for about 3 months, and then she came back. It went extremely well. She was thrilled, and she was great because she started singing my praises, and the next thing you know, like everybody's paying attention. And so they hired me. This is how crazy I was, and young and fearless.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You got to. That's what you got to do.
Well, the principal called me in the office when they knew she was coming back and said, Dan, we don't have a music position here, but I like you. I think you're a good worker, but I've got some long-term subs coming up in special education.
Okay.
Would you be willing to step into those positions? And I said to him, sir, I need to make money so that I can pay this college back. So whatever you got, sign me up, I'll do it. And so I was doing emotional support in three long-term subs for the rest of the year. So I worked that entire year. At the end of the year, the orchestra director at the high school retired, and I applied for the position. Again, zero fear, not my expertise at all, but like I needed the job, and they went through the interview process and realized that I was not the orchestra person, but they liked me enough that the band director at the high school at the time said, you know what? I've got enough orchestra background, and my wife is an orchestra person that I think I can pick up what is needed to do this job. Why don't you give him the general music load at the high school? Because I believe he can make connections with kids. Why don't you give him the jazz bands? Because that's not my forte, and that's Dan's forte.
Right.
And we'll let him teach all the percussion sectionals, and he can work with the jazz kids, and we'll make it a full-time job. And so they offered me
So,
a
so by
dream.
the end of your first year, this is what was happening. You were getting you getting
It was the beginnings of what's going to become my job 20 some years down the road, but it was
right.
at the time it was really controversial, because who hires a jazz band director, and who and really it was more of a general music position.
And
Um
when you say general music, what are you talking about?
at the time they taught ninth grade general music,
Okay.
and it was as horrible as you would think it would be. And
And
I
everything was dictated to you what you had to teach at that time.
open up the book to page 2.
Okay. Yes.
This is a
The answer is
membrane at
yes.
home. you know and finally I had a kid in class one day he's looking, and he was a good kid, and he goes, "Oh, this sucks." And like dagger right in the heart. I'm going, "Oh." And so I freaked the class out. I was like, "Hey guys, do me a favor. Close the books, pass them forward." Now, in my day, if you close the books and pass them forward, that meant you were going to write for the next 30 minutes, right?
Right,
And they're
right,
going, no, 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 please, please, please. No, 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 no. I'm sorry. I didn't mean anything, but I said, just stop, pass the books forward. So they passed them forward, and I was like, you're right. We're not going to do this anymore. And the kid said to me, he goes, look, man, I just want to like music. And this isn't helping me to like music. And I
right.
was like,
And that's fair.
that is a very, very
That is
fair
fair.
point. That is a fair point. So at that point in time, I was like, what do you want to learn about? He's like, I want to learn about like the music that I like and where it came from. So then we started the very next year. And I started it before, we just didn't have the curriculum.
Right,
But I did history of American popular music, and we started talking about the history of rock and roll.
right.
And and then out of that, for a short period of time we had a history of jazz class. I based a lot of that on the Ken Burns series because that was just phenomenal.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so little by little, I kind of started doing my own little thing because I felt like the kids needed it. And being a performer, like I want it. The expectation used to be that everybody should be playing, and I selfishly I would love that. I say this every year. I would love if every kid took my modern band class. I would love that, but that's not the reality of the situation. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to put a hand up and push people away who just want to appreciate music and enjoy just sitting there and listening to it, because we need those people in the audience too.
right, right,
It
right,
can't just be a bunch of musicians. Like there's got to be other people there.
right.
Um, so so I kind of taught under that philosophy then for many, many years.
Yeah. So how did this you're teaching kind of like jazz band for a number of years, and then how did the whole modern band thing even become a thing? Because that seems like a
Man.
major coup.
Yeah.
Because
So
because I want to tell you, this goes back to some of my stuff. I was in East York Elementary School, and I played. I had an Eagle like $47 acoustic guitar that I still have hanging on my wall upstairs. And I was proud. I'm a string player. Can I play in the orchestra? And Mrs. Roman said, who I think is still alive, which is weird because I'm old and she was old then. But she says, no, you're not, you can't play in the orchestra. And I was heartbroken.
hmm,
But it's like that. There was a divide. Like, and we're talking about 70s and 80s
yeah.
for me. Like I was in East York Elementary, it's probably in the 70s, late 70s or maybe 1980.
Hmm.
So those were the years then. So there was a divide. So you're able, you got this modern band. You were talking about there's like inklings of this in other parts of the state. How
Yeah.
there are people. You tell your story. I'm not even gonna.
So I'll say this, like I always felt like the black sheep in everything that I did.
Hmm.
And it's not that people made me feel that way. And I'm not gonna sit here and say, what was me? I had bad music teachers. Like that's just simply
Yeah,
not
yeah,
true. But when I was playing in bands with my dad when I was a teenager, like you didn't talk about those things. Like when you went to concert band or marching band practice, you weren't a gigging musician, and it wasn't viewed as being legit, right? And so you didn't talk about it. You didn't let that get around because you were afraid of what that might mean.
right.
And there was plenty of people that would look down on it. Even when you got to college, you kind of had that thing. So I always felt like the black sheep, and you could figure out real quick who knew and respected you and kind of let you do your thing, and who tried to push you out of it. And so I always gravitated towards the people that I think I felt musically safe with.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so that being said, I get to there's my right after they hired me full time. So it was like my second year of teaching, and we're sitting in a department meeting. And they're kicking around ideas of how to get kids more interested in signing up for music classes, right? It was an open department conversation. It was all music teachers sitting there, all nine of us. And I said, "Hey, you know, I think this is going on without us even knowing about it, and I wonder if we could tap into it. Have we ever thought about having a school-sanctioned rock band? Like run it like the jazz band, but like a rock band that could go out and do like some fun things or maybe some student shows or just
And
things
pep
like that.
rallies.
Yeah, I think people might be really excited for that. And I'll never forget. One of the music teachers looks over at me and he says, it might be a good idea if you just do what they're paying you to do. And I
Stay in
said,
your
yeah,
lane.
stay in my lane. And the lane that's your lane is not really your lane, so don't be in any of those lanes,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And so young and happy to have a job and already knew that I was pushing the limit by being a jazz director as my primary ensemble. I kind of bottled it back up. And
Okay, so you wait till that guy retires.
I didn't really think about it. And then, so I'd love to say that, like, 2 years later, but the truth of the matter is, it wasn't until about 6 years ago that we opened that back up again. So, like, 18, 16 years passes.
Okay.
And I'm midpoint in my career. And
Which
I have,
you look like you're like 29 years old. So I don't even know. I don't even.
bless you, man. No, I was in school in the 80s too,
You
so
bathe in buttermilk.
yeah. Um yeah, it was all that good living.
Yeah, right, right.
So I 6 years ago I have a junior in high school who is a fantastic drummer. He's now a senior at Duquesne. Um and we saw that there was this thing popping up on the all national circuit called Modern Band, and we kind of researched it a little bit, and I was just like, hey dude, like I think you could do this. Like I think you could make this. And so we got some free studio time with Kyle Kirkpatrick. His wife is the choral director at the high school with me. And I kind of leaned on him like, hey man, I need a favor. Like I got this kid. He's really good, and I don't want my lack of skills to keep this kid from this opportunity. Could we maybe could we maybe set up a recording session where he could play over some drumless tracks and we could send that off? So this kid walks in and he plays Carry On Wayward Son as part of his audition. And then he follows it up with playing Rosanna with the complete and accurate Picaro shuffle and
Okay.
just kills it.
All right.
And they picked him for the All National Modern Band. He was one of three drummers that they picked.
All right.
And this was out of the entire nation. Um, and so he went to this thing, and little did we know, he was a songwriter. And they asked at this thing, at the all national event, does anybody have any songs that they've written? And he says, well, yeah, I do. So not only is he one of three drummers in the nation that they picked, but he was the person that they played in. He was the first one to ever have an all original composition played at an all national event for modern band,
Right.
right? And he comes back to Spring Grove, and the department chair, my buddy Tim Buck, says, hey, you know what? This modern band thing's catching on. I don't know if you're paying attention, but like it's happening out in California, it's in New York City, it's in Vegas. Um, I I think you're the guy. And I was like, Tim, what are you talking about? He goes, well, you play in rock bands and you understand lots of different instruments and you play lots of different instruments. And we've been talking about how to like resurrect some aspects of our music program. Like, I think you might be the guy. Like, what if we did this curricularly? And I was like, I mean, I tried that a bit ago, and honestly, we hit the perfect storm. I I do I have no fear, and I do have a knowledge on the big four in a pop situation, right? I'm comfortable on those instruments,
Mm-hmm.
and I also had a department chair who really had my back and was able to do a lot of the legwork in the stuff that I don't particularly enjoy, which is all of the heavy lifting on the writing and the curriculum and stuff like that. Tim did a ton of that for me.
Okay.
And then I had I had this crazy, I make big bold statements, but I tend to back them up. I was asked, what do we think what do we think the benefit of putting a modern band is? And I said, well, I think I think we'll add another 25% to the music department in the first year, and I think it'll grow from there. And I think they thought I was being cocky, but I said, no, I think
It
we're gonna,
doesn't stop at modern band. It's like once they get the music bug, it's like I tell my students to collect experiences
yeah.
and don't be
And
elitist.
and so
Don't be
so
elitist. It's like you can learn from all kinds of stuff. And it's like
steal from
you say the
everybody,
same
man.
thing,
Absolutely,
and
absolutely.
they see it.
Yeah. So they yeah, they went for it. And the way that I sold it was I showed up to a school board meeting with there's 9 people on the school board, and I showed up with a dozen acoustic guitars, and I was like, okay, uh, we're all gonna play guitar today. And I passed them out, and I just started showing them little things and building upon it. The next thing you know, they were playing Chameleon, um, Herbie Hancock. And some better than others, right? And some were like dying laughing, like they couldn't do a thing, and others were kind of hanging. But at the end, everybody was having a good time, and it was unanimously approved. Um, and then and then we were getting ready for the first day, and I was like, my the equipment that was supposed to be here never showed up. And someone said, "Oh my God, I forgot to budget for it." And I was like, "I got classes coming in with 18 kids, and I've got no instruments. How are we going to do this?" And we did two things. We did an instrument drive. Hey everybody, I know you got these instruments laying around that you're not using anymore, and if you just like to get rid of them, we will certainly give you a really good home. And oh, by the way, you can write it off on your taxes. And
Hmm.
I started getting drum sets left and right. I started getting bass guitars and electric guitars, and
Right.
people were bringing in keyboards and all sorts of other things. But the other like perfect storm portion of this story is that I had an assistant superintendent who was on her way out, and she knew it. And she basically gave us her entire budget to cover what we didn't have to make it work. And so you hear about schools that are one to one with iPads or computers.
Right.
Well, if you sign up for a modern band class at Spring Grove, we're one to one. Every kid gets a guitar, and you get it for the entire length that you're using in class. You can take it home. You're responsible for it, but
Right.
it's yours to use. And I want you to have access to it. And we give them a place in the instrument storage room, just like the band kids and the orchestra kids. Here's a place where you can store your guitar. And
Right.
this is your space, and you are welcome here. And like kids were excited because we can play rock and we can play country and we can play whatever.
They can
But
kind of
also,
define a little bit, and we'll talk a little later about this. But
yeah,
yours is kind of free. Like you're not this tyrant that we must do this. I'm
that's
more
right.
like that than you are
I have,
because I want to share. You gotta know who the Beatles are. You gotta know who
yeah.
Black Sabbath is. This is what you. But
Yeah, and to some extent I am, but um I don't know, I think it's because my journey was so different that I want people to embrace their journey.
right,
And I just want I just want kids to have an opportunity,
right, right.
and um band is amazing, and orchestra is amazing, and
Mhm.
choir is amazing, and I go to all of those concerts at the high school. I love them. I
Right,
sit
right.
through every single one. I don't skip. Um But I would be a fool to sit here and say that services every single student, and every single student should be interested in that. I think everybody should respect all different musical genres, but I don't think that all of them apply or appeal to everybody.
Right.
And so there's musical genres that I don't particularly find myself drawn to. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with it. It just means it's not my particular interest. But we have a saying in our family, you don't yuck someone else's yum, like
Hmm.
if that's musically what they're into, that's
Right, right.
awesome.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
cool. You like music, that done. Good enough for me.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so yeah, I am free in a lot of ways. But I also have this philosophy that like when I leave at the end of the day, why am I tired? Like, why am I doing all the work? It's your education. You should be doing the work. And
Right.
with my modern bands, like they pick what they play. I've never walked in and went, "Hey, here's the song you're going to do." I may have made recommendations like, "Hey, after hearing you guys and kind of seeing where your talents lie, have you thought about trying this?" But ultimately, the students always say yes or no, and that's how we operate. And
Okay.
and, and so I get kids really plugged in because like you want to play Green Day? Great, man. Let's play Green Day. Like
Right.
absolutely. We'll do it to the best of our ability. And I can coach all the different aspects of all the different elements of music through pop music.
Yes.
I can.
Yeah.
We can talk dynamics, we can talk articulation, we can talk feel, all of those things apply. And sometimes it's easier because you get the sheet music out of the way and you're looking at music just in its natural form, how you hear it, how you're interpreting it.
That's the other thing. It's like that's a different kind of way of teaching. It's like the listening matters. In other words, it's like everything when I was growing up, I was under the assumption that if it wasn't written down, then you were cheating if you're not using scores or whatever. And I was cheating all the time. I was developing my ear all the time, but it's like
Hmm.
I was doing so with a guilty conscience.
Yeah.
But that's the best thing I could have done.
Yeah.
Like you inspire your students to do the listening and to do the borrowing from as many people as they can.
Yeah, and I think we had this conversation before. Like I always say to them, guys, if I had YouTube when I was your age, woo, like
Right.
I'd have been scary, man, because
Right.
I remember sitting in my high school director's office, little tiny cramped office, picking out all of his cassette tapes that he had of all of the jazz charts that we were playing and trying to make my own mixtape so I could listen to it in the car so I could have it in my head all the time or that I could play along with it,
Yeah.
at home with my home stereo and my headphones on. And nowadays kids just do a search for it with the arranger and there it is immediately and you got it.
That's what I
And
do.
and and the truth be told, like I developed certain muscles, musical muscles, by having to like be able to read a little bit. Like I can read a drum chart, no problem.
Right.
Like I
Right.
sight read a lot of stuff on drum charts, and I still feel very confident in that. Um, but my ability to seek stuff out is really really strong. And I think a lot
Yeah.
of students this day, because it's all there, they take it for granted or they don't even think about it. I'm like, holy cow, like if I had had access to all the things that you guys have access to, like I would have never left the practice room. Like I'd have been there all the time.
So the what we were talking about before is like because it was so hard back in the day, like what is that? Forge steel forges steel or whatever. In
Hmm.
other words, you develop skills that that people don't develop as easily now because everything is here. Here's how you
Yeah.
play Wonderwall.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So they don't use their ears as much. So, but we had to struggle through it, and then eventually it wasn't so much a struggle because we got good at it.
Yeah. You get your sea
So
legs, you know?
right.
Yeah.
So so how was this on a state level? What was what was the journey you had to go through with some of the people on the state governing board, the PMEA kind of stuff? How are they with all this? And how
Um,
what's the kind of the history of that?
yeah, so that first year, like 6 years ago, that we had a student make all nationals, I the president for District 7 PMEA at the time, Sam Fisher, great guy. Um, there was two or three kids that made it from this area in the all national ensemble, and he kind of pulled me aside there and he was like, "Man, there's something here. There's something going on here. We need to know about it. We need to tap into it. We need to explore this more." And and so that opportunity kind of started presenting itself. And then obviously the next year, COVID happens. And we had that year, I had two students make all nationals. The drummer made it a second time, and I had a guitarist who's now doing an internship down in Nashville. They made it that
Who
year.
is that?
His name is Peyton Rohrball.
Yeah, it wasn't me.
Um, Beautiful singer, man.
Right.
Great lefty-handed guitarist.
Uh-huh.
Just so good. Definitely look up his stuff.
Uh,
But anyway, they made the festival. It was an online virtual thing, and that was in the early stages where like they were trying to compile videos, but it it was a little rough. Like we've gotten a
right.
lot better in the last couple of years at doing that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And well, anyway, PMEA at the local level, like District 7, so it's the 8 counties kind of around here. They that kind of came forward and was like, "Hey, we think we should start this festival, and we think you're the guy to do it." And so um, I worked I worked with Sam, and then I worked with Chris Campbell, and then I worked with Rob Schaubach to kind of get that thing off the ground. And when I did, um, I think it was the year that Rob was vice president, right before he jumped into the presidency. And the first year we had it at Spring Grove, where we had students outside audition, and we compiled a band and put it together. Um, Rob's sitting in the back of the auditorium, and I walked over and I kind of, "Hey boss, how's it going?" And he had he was welling up with tears,
Uh,
and he just says like, I had no idea. I had no idea this could be done. I had no
right.
idea that this was possible. It never occurred to me. And I'm
That's
so
that's
sorry
fair and
I
that's
missed it.
honest. That's fair.
Yeah, and he said, I'm so sorry I missed it, but like this needs to happen more. This needs to keep going. And so from that moment, there's been this like just build. And, this will be the fifth year that we're running the festival. We had more students audition this year, and every consecutive year it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. We took more students into the festival this time. We took 35. They're making 5 bands out of it.
Hmm.
Um, and, um, and it's been I don't want to say a slow burn because it was a spark and then it like caught fire and now it's slowly spreading bigger. Um, at the all-state level, it was a little bit different. It's different. It's different politics there. Um, I think a lot of things get done from a logistical standpoint, and there's a lot of people pulling for their wants and needs and desires. And I think the people who are in leadership positions there hear a lot from different people as to what they want. And I think we were trying to get all nationals. They eventually, NAFME basically said, like, hey, we're done with the all national format. It's too expensive for people to come, and we feel like it's not sustainable. And so I was kind of bummed by that. All Easterns only happens every other year, and they put a modern band in. But I had some seniors last year who I thought were really talented kids and deserved an opportunity to have one last big festival
Hurrah.
experience.
Right, right.
Yeah, and I pushed like hell to get that in, and it just I kept I kept running into people that were saying no or not yet, or they had the conference in Erie and they said like Erie it's just too small of a venue, like we don't have a place to host it, and we want to make sure that we're presenting it in a way that honors it properly. And I think some people were really behind it and disappointed that it couldn't get done at the time. I think there were some people that were, um, they, I believe they were intimidated and they labeled it as something else, and that's a shame.
Yeah,
Because I'd rather someone just tell me that they're scared and let me tell them it's going to be okay, you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
But anyway,
But it goes against everything that that the paradigm that they kind of have that they grew up in. It's like this is what, and it kind of goes different. It's not to say it's better. It's
it's
just a
fear-based
different,
mentality,
huh?
right? It's fear-based mentality. It's
Right,
I'm afraid of what I don't understand or what I don't know, so
right,
therefore it must be bad or wrong. And and it's really not, but I understand. I
right.
understand. And but they also recognized very quickly that I wasn't going to let it go. And so I just kept pushing and pushing, and I was making phone calls, and I was heated. I was heated, and I wasn't nasty, but I was just saying like I don't understand how these things are happening, and we're talking about pushing music education, and we're not going to represent this at the all state level. Well, what ended up happening was they instead allowed modern bands from around the state last year to come in as spotlight ensembles, and we stacked the deck with really really talented bands, and we went in and blew the doors off the place. Like Spring Grove went in as a featured performer at PMEA last year,
Mhm.
and it was super fun, and they did it. They're doing it again this year at PMEA, um, where you could apply to take your band. And I elected this year. I want other bands to go in there. I need them to see that there's somebody other than Spring Grove.
Right.
Like I'm proving my point by not taking my band this year because I
Yeah,
want them
yeah.
to see that. Well, then we found out that they approved an all-state modern band, but for next year. And I felt
Right.
like that was the last like, all right, you win, but not this year,
Right.
But we got it done.
All
And
right.
so that was fun. And there's a bunch of modern band directors in the state who we've kind of connected and become friends. And we have a group chat that we call Skunk Works because that's where all our stinky ideas go. And it's gotten to be, I don't think I've ever found a brotherhood quite like this. Like these are guys that maybe I talk to 3, 4 times a year, but when I get in the same room with them, I feel like we've been best friends forever.
Right.
And
Right.
I think it's all because we're drinking from the same well and preaching the same gospel,
Yeah, yeah.
and you immediately are drawn to people like that. So
Right. Right.
you got your heavy hitters like a Kevin Longwell out towards Philly, and you
Who's the
got
guy? Who's the guy you were talking about? Was it Johnstown or something?
Mike Kokas.
Yeah.
Mike is an incredible human being. I
Right.
call him the Swiss Army knife of modern band. He can
Okay.
do anything.
Uh-huh.
Um, he's a trained bassoon player, and he got so into it that he became a sick bass player. Like,
Okay.
and his band is great. Like it is like Ben Folds Five kind of thing. It
Okay.
is so good. It is
Yeah.
so good. Um, there's a guy, Nelson Rodriguez Parada, who's up in the Shamokin area, District 8.
Mm-hmm.
Great guy. I mean, these people are all over the place and they're doing amazing things. And so you're starting to find each other,
Mm-hmm.
starting to connect, and then we build and we help each other out. I've gotten the opportunity to guest conduct at both the D8 and the D6 festivals for Nelson and Mike, and it was totally different, both experiences, but both so fulfilling and amazing. And
Yeah.
man, I hope to do more of that type of thing. Like it was so much fun. So really, really cool. So it's coming along in the state. I would say it's finally gonna arrive next year at this time. We
That
just
is fine.
have to
I'm
wait.
still I'm still alive.
Yeah, yeah. I better be.
So so your kids so you're like the autonomy. I think what is cool about your approach is like, okay, so you make suggestions on like in your classrooms,
Hmm.
and we'll talk a little bit about some of your classes. But your classrooms, they can kind of decide on what music they play. How much? How what? Where do you like put stuff into their eye like into their pool? Here's something to think about, like music wise.
I will if I feel like we're stuck and we
Yeah.
just need a shove.
Right.
I'll do the hey, have you thought about this? Or I'll give you a
You're
good
like a
one.
producer. You're a
Honestly,
record.
man,
You're a record producer. Yeah, like the
I
old school producer. That is what
yes,
their job is to do.
yes, and I honestly spend a lot of time. It sounds bad, and I don't mean to take away from anybody that does any kind of counseling, but there's a lot of therapy in what I do too. Like,
That's producing
you're
too.
dealing with interpersonal conflict in a band, so you gotta be able to talk it out and see everybody's point of view, and to
Right.
be able to really listen to what the other person is saying.
Right.
And so, you're dealing with teenagers,
Right.
and when I was a teenager, I know I did things that were like not helpful, and it was really helpful if someone gently came along and said, like, "Hey, like, what just happened there? In the real world, man, that's not going to go well. Like, there's a different way to handle that. Let's re-examine and find a better solution."
Yeah.
So so, like in my classes, when you get in a performance modern band, so that's modern band two, that's select modern band, all of the reins come off, and I let the horse run. And wherever that horse is going to run, that's great. I try to make it run as fast as it can and as clean as it can, but like it's going to do the work and it picks the direction that it goes.
Right.
I might help to guide it. I might give it some ideas along the way. But I find that like kids are more bought in when they have the voice and choice over what they're doing.
Yeah.
And again, I can teach musical elements in any style. So
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
when I'm coaching the group, I might say like, hey, can we dynamically, can we bring things down a little bit? Like if we're up here all the time, people get kind of desensitized to it. But if you have some shaping in your storytelling, now all of a sudden that's way more interesting. So maybe we bring the verse down, and maybe the choruses are big, and maybe during the bridge there's this huge build that happens, and
Crescendo.
yeah, and we talk about crescendo and we can say forte or loud, and I'm working these things in while they're not realizing it. It doesn't feel like someone's sitting there telling me
Right.
say forte. Like they just hear it. And then after a while, it's like the way that you learn language. If someone keeps holding up, an eating utensil and saying spoon, after a while, a little kid knows that's a spoon. And then they
Right.
start to use that word, right? So
Right. Right.
if in the course of conversation, the kids find out that forte is loud, the next thing you know, they're going to say, "Hey, that should be forte right there." And like, "Oh, you can do that in rock and roll?" Yes, of course, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, the only class that I don't do that in is we have I call it like a quick start, you know, zero to Guitar Hero kind of class, and it's my Modern Band 1 class where
I think this is genius. And
thank you.
I will say, because like I have students that I said, you go into that, and they're like, well, I already know how to play some guitar. Yeah, but you can learn how to play other instruments too. And the whole, you can freely, I can try drums, I can try keyboards, I can try all these different things.
Yeah, for
Go ahead,
free.
you explain it. I'm sorry.
No, 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 it's cool. No, thank you. And I'd love to say it was all my idea. I was picking and pulling things off of, at the time it was Little Kids Rock. Now it's Music Will. They're phenomenal.
Uh,
Um, but I was thinking like, well, why don't we do a year-long class and we do a marking period on the big four? So I start out with a marking period on drum set. Everybody plays drum set. 15 drum sets in a room. We're all just
that's
figuring it out. And kids are failing and succeeding right next to each other, but no one's like embarrassed about it or looking over and going, "Oh God, they just heard that I made a mistake," because everybody's playing at the same time and we're all
right.
figuring it out together. And then after a marking period, like they've got enough that they can kind of hang, and then we move over to playing some guitar. And we just do some basic stuff like, man, here's some chords. But what I care more about is the process. Can you look at that chord sheet and see, like, I need to learn how to play an A minor chord. And if I look it up here, I know that I place my fingers here, and now I'm playing an A minor chord.
Right.
Great. That's the most important tool. Not that you can play an A minor chord, it's that you can figure out how to play the chords that you don't know, because there's way more chords that you don't know how to play than you'll learn in this class. And so you need to be able to figure out how to apply that knowledge. So
Yeah.
they do like a marking period on guitar, and then I switch over to bass because it's an easy transition. We're already talking about frets. It's
Guitar
less
adjacent.
strings. They already know how to tune it. Like
Mhm.
it's easy. And so they do about a marking period on bass, and then I finish up with a marking period on keyboard. Um, and that's one where I teach it a little bit different because we're talking about chord shapes, and and towards the end of it we start talking about inversions, because like we don't want to be bouncing this way. We want to
Right.
be
Right. Right.
bouncing
Right.
this way, right?
Voice
And
leading.
so yeah, yeah, yeah. And I don't even call it that. I just go like, look, we're lazy. If I can cover the same chord by only moving my pinky, why am I moving my entire hand? That's
I
crazy,
call that the slide.
Yeah.
Like going
Yeah.
from your C chord to your F chord, where your thumb is on the C
Yep.
note, and you just
Just
yeah.
stays right there. And the best
Uh,
part about it is, man, that's so
ain't too
church.
proud
That
to
is so
beg.
church.
Ain't,
You
ain't
know.
too proud to beg.
Yep.
Temptations. That's the song
Yep.
that I.
So we finish up usually with like 4 to 6 weeks left in the year. And then the last part of it is, okay, great. Let's divvy up into smaller bands. So now you might have 14 kids in a class, you might have two bands of 7 kids. And I'll say, okay, everybody pick your instrument. Let's try to have like at least a drummer and a bass player, and then a couple guitarists, a couple keyboard players. Maybe someone wants to be the lead singer. I don't force anybody, but maybe somebody wants to. You'd be amazed at how many people try it. And then great, let's learn a song. Let's figure out how to do it. And so they'll pick different tunes and then they play for each other. And like sometimes it's a hot mess and sometimes it's amazing, but it's always fun and they're always learning something. And um And a good percentage of them then continue on into modern band too, because that's where the doors open up to them and they go like, oh, like I can kind of hang. And every single year I've got multiple kids that come in around Christmas time and tell me like, hey, my parents bought me a bass for Christmas, or hey, I just got a new drum set, or hey, I got, and so now we got lifelong learners, which I'm really passionate about.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
sometimes it's the kids that you didn't expect.
Yeah. So that's one of the things I really appreciate about your approach, because what you're doing is you're teaching them instruments that are easy to maintain after graduation.
Yep.
Like, not everybody's going to join an orchestra after they graduate from high school. Some people can join, I guess, the Lancers, and then you can like, trumpet players, Lancers, and then like I know the Ravens, the marching
Hmm.
Ravens, and whatever. But even those gigs are not all that. In other words, a lot of people just drop, never play the instrument again.
Yeah, those opportunities are few and far between.
Yeah.
And
So you're teaching instruments that you can write on. You can play in garages. You can play in coffee shops. You can play in wherever on.
yeah,
So it's easy. It's kind of an easier business model.
absolutely.
Yeah. So it's like and these are, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's next in your modern band? What do you have in store?
Um,
What would you like
I,
to bring to it?
oh man, I think I would like to, it sounds crazy. I want to teach teachers. Like I want to teach people, I want to teach people that what I do is so easy and it's not scary and you don't have to be. I think there's this thought that like, oh, I have to be this rock musician in order to do this. Wrong. Nope. As a matter of fact, some of the best ones are the ones that have no training in it at all, but they're smart enough to get out of the way. Get
Right.
out of the way. Empower the students, help them to kind of like figure out how to do things, and then let them do it. Too often, I think musicians have to be the smartest or the greatest musician in the room. I've had students in my program who are way better guitarists than I am, way better piano players, way better bass players, and kids that could like at their age were way better drummers than I was in high school. And I'm not intimidated by that because it's not about a competition. It's about providing opportunity and giving them a chance to grow. And so I kind of look at myself as the kind of the guide on the side. I would love to teach other teachers or young students who are studying to be teachers how to do the same things that I'm doing because it's really not complicated and it's really
This
not
should be
hard.
this should in my opinion, this should be something that they teach in like colleges, like music ed majors.
Well, and they are like my
It's
good buddy
changing.
Michaela
Like
Kurtz
the
is
world is
teaching at
changing. That's
Duquesne.
what that's again.
Yeah. Yeah. Michaela Kurtz is at Duquesne. We were in the Modern Band certificate program at Lebanon Valley. She's a phenomenal educator.
Uh-huh.
I love working with her. You've got Kevin Longwell, who's doing it at Temple now.
Okay.
You've got Lebanon Valley has it as part of their music ed curriculum. Warren Graham's up there doing a fantastic job. So, I mean, it's coming. Jennifer Jester's got
I
it
was gonna say the Millersville,
yeah, at Millersville. I mean, and they're all,
my
here's the
alma
cool
mater.
thing. They're all amazing people. Like they're all great people. I've
Right.
I've never met a jerk doing modern band yet. I haven't. I
Okay.
just haven't. So I think, but I would love to, I would love to, I've done a lot of guest lecturing, a lot of Zooms like this with college students. But even just like professional development, I would love like I always view it this way. The knowledge that I have on this is free. I'm not selling it. I don't want to make a dollar off this. What I
Right.
want is other kids to have the opportunity that my kids
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
And
Because that's a
and
whole group of people that you're like, even if they don't go to the higher things, that
right.
you just changed their life.
Well, and I've had parents come up to me at graduation. This last year, I graduated three students that after their freshman year of high school, I'm sure they were identified as like, oh, we got to keep an eye on these kids, right? And and one of them in particular comes from like a really rough home, like doesn't have both parents. Um, and I'm sure the student still was struggling with that. And that 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 student needed my program so bad. And there were times where they thought about yanking that student from my program, and I would literally go in and go, please do not do that. It is the only thing keeping this kid here. You care about your graduation rate, don't don't pull this kid, you know.
Right.
I had a student who made all nationals and all East and was just an amazing singer, amazing songwriter, amazing talent. Um, actually was a part of the Do They Know It's Christmas?
Okay.
One of the singers on that. Um, but comes from a difficult home situation and
Yeah.
not a ton of money and didn't have a whole lot of backing and needed what we had. And it's not a like I didn't do it. We just created the opportunity
Yeah.
for that student to be who they were. And I had a family come to see me at graduation, and the student was tough, like really tough. Like there were some days I would go in and I would go like, I don't know how this is gonna go today, you know? And the mother at graduation, tears streaming down her face, thanking me because her son graduated,
Right.
and
That
she
might have been
knew.
the only reason he graduated.
She told me this is the
Yeah.
only thing that kept him in school. He was going to quit 20 times,
Right.
and but he didn't want to let this program down, and he didn't want to let you down. And if nothing else, I can say, well, we got that kid a diploma,
Right.
and modern band did that.
Right.
Like
Right.
and that's all it needed. And in general, I think kids just need a reason to belong. They need a place to feel accepted.
Yeah.
And I'm just creating one more opportunity for that. But I'm trying to meet kids where they are and that acceptance to happen in their style of music that they're into,
Hmm.
you know. But there's nothing crazy or magical about it. And
I think it's all magic. I think
yeah,
it's
yeah,
in other words, yeah. No, I think it's all magic. But the
but
because
the funny thing is some of the pushback that I get, you know, I
it's
think there's
good
people
magic.
there's people who are afraid of the power of that, and they're afraid that you're going to come take all my orchestra students, or
Right.
I'm just
Right.
going to ruin the choral program or whatever. It has not done that at all in Spring Grove. As a matter
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
fact, kids get down in that area and they go, "Oh, this isn't so scary. What else can I do down here?" And we can sign them up for other music classes. Like, hey, you really like songwriting and you're really into this whole thing. Have you ever thought about taking music theory? Like, that could really help you in learning how to voice lead and do other things like that. So I, I make this bold statement to teachers all the time, and I've done it every time I presented at a PMEA or anytime I'm in a room with educators. I say this: I don't want your kids. Like, they're not the kids I'm interested in. Some of them might naturally gravitate towards what I'm doing, but I want the kids that we're not servicing. We
Right.
music programs in general are doing 15, if you're really, really smoking, maybe 20% of the school. What's that other 80% doing, and how are you meeting them? Because you can't just say if a kid has no band experience, well, band's where it's at, because the kid doesn't know that.
Right.
And I agree, band is awesome, but like sometimes we got to meet them at their own area,
Hmm.
and they might naturally gravitate into another area once they figure it out. I just want them connected and loving music. That's all that really matters.
Right.
So I always say, like, I don't really want your kids. And the other thing that's really helpful is I always say this: I don't want your budget either, because
Right.
because we're very territorial, right? Like, don't take my money from me because we don't have a whole lot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And that's
that's
understandable.
yeah. So one of the successes that we had when we started the program at Spring Grove is I promised all the music teachers, I'm not touching your budget. I don't want it. And and if what I do gets is in direct competition with what you're trying to do financially, I'll shut mine down. I'll stop
Yeah.
because I believe in what you guys are doing and I don't want it to be a competitive thing. It's not.
Yeah.
I want them to be healthy. I want them to be successful, and I want them to want the same things for my program, you
Right.
know.
Yes. Hopefully they are treating you with the same respect.
Rod, my coworkers are phenomenal.
That's
Like
wonderful. That's wonderful.
our high school music department, they get it. We've had a team mentality since the three of us have been there together. I was, I'm the old dog. I was the first one there, but as the other two moved in, like it has been there's a lot of programs that could really learn from my coworkers.
Yeah.
Like this is how you disagree. When we budget, we sit in a room together and we put all of our wants and needs and desires on the table, and then we as a group talk about like, hey, what do we think is most important here? And you'd be amazed at how many times somebody says, you know what, I'd really love to have this, but that thing that that other person is asking for is way more important. So let's do that.
Yeah.
Like it
That's
happens
wonderful.
all the time.
That's great. That's the way it
Yeah,
should be done.
but we never fight. There's never an argument about money. Like and we're always there to support each other. And it's a healthy department because of it.
That's one trust matters.
Absolutely.
Trust matters. Well, thank you, Dan. You're on the inside, and it's like you keep doing it. Keep doing it.
Yeah, brother.
It's like as I said, it's like yeah, I appreciate you. That's it.
I appreciate you, man.
And what
Thanks
you're
for having
doing
me
and
on.
what you're doing because it yeah, that's what we do. We always done it, but it was always underground. And we did it like I personally like didn't get this in high school. We were the teacher that we never had. And you're kind of the teacher I never had. So thank you. And I'm sure they thank you too. So all right.
Thanks, man. Super kind of
All
you.
righty. So see you everybody. Thank you, Dan. And that was great. Good for you.
Deuces, y'all.
See you then.